It may only be week 9, but with 3 teams atop the NFC West with the same 4-4 record and the Rams just a half game behind those 3 teams, it truly is must-win season within the division. And the Rams and Seahawks will be meeting up this week. Just how important is this game in terms of the NFC West Division Championship? We're going to be breaking it all down on Matchup Wednesday here on Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, here on Matchup Wednesday by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there, whether you're listening down in Bonnie Lake, Washington, or overseas in Athens, Greece. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We're drawing closer to week 9. Seahawks taking on the Rams, the first of 2 NFC West matchups against their rivals from Southern California. We're going to be taking a deep dive into all the key matchups to watch when the Seahawks and Rams meet up on Sunday at Lumen Field on offense and the defensive side of the football. It's going to be a jam-packed episode brought your way courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. New customers can get a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. There's still 9 games, for some teams 10 games remaining on the 2024 schedule. We're not quite to what would be considered the halfway point. There really isn't a 50-50 halfway point anymore with there being a 17-game schedule. But it does feel like we are now already reaching must-win territory within the NFC West. There's 3 teams atop the division tied with a 4-4 record. The Seahawks right now are number 3 of those 3 teams because they lost to the 49ers and they have lost 3 games within the conference. So they are last place among those 3 teams. The Rams are coming right behind, only half a game out. So some would argue, well, if it's that close together, then how can you say this game is must win? But at least from Seattle and Los Angeles perspective here, Rob, both these teams badly need an NFC West win and an NFC win. It has been rough going for this division going against other NFC teams. If you are wanting to win this division or be a wild card team, you got to start stacking some victories, not just within the division, but within the conference, which makes this matchup on Sunday, again, it's a home one for the Seahawks. They've already lost 3 home games, 2 of them being conference games. They badly need this one. And the Rams, they're still under 500, so obviously this is a critical game for them as well. It truly is must-win season in the NFC West.
I would argue it's more of a must-win game for the Seahawks than it is for the Rams. The Rams are playing pretty good football right now. They're getting healthier. They've won the last 2 games. However, they have yet to win a game on the road. And so I get the desperation from the LA perspective is that they just want to kind of flex a little bit on the road. Again, they're 0-3 when leaving SoFi Stadium. But at the same time, for the Seahawks squad that just got beat, this and beaten it badly. And it has had 3 losses so far this season at home. It's critical that they are able to get this victory, get themselves 1-1 in the NFC West division, to be able to beat an LA Rams team that, frankly, the last couple of years has not been as talented as the Seahawks, and yet have still been able to get as many victories basically as has been on their schedule. I mean, they've controlled Seattle. I think there's a lot of Seahawks fans out there who understand if they lose occasionally to the 49ers, because you look at the 49ers, a team that's gone to a couple Super Bowls here recently, and you can understand why you might be able to lose against a team like that. But with the LA Rams losing Aaron Donald, with Cooper Kupp suffering the injuries that he has over the last couple of seasons, I think there's an expectation that, okay, the Rams have dropped a spot. This might be a natural position for Seattle to ascend. So that is my biggest argument. Look, there's not going to be very many times where we are before Halloween where I'm going to argue that this is a must-win victory, or a must-win game, excuse me. But this does feel like a game that the Seahawks absolutely have to win to kind of get going. Mostly because, as you mentioned, Corbin, the Seahawks have and really all of the NFC West has struggled against other NFC opponents. This is the first of 4 out of 5 that the Seahawks are going to be going up against their NFC West opponents. You have got to be able to hold serve here when your home game against the LA Rams. Obviously, you already lost your home game against the San Francisco 49ers. You're going to get another opportunity to go at San Francisco after next week's bye. So if Seattle can just win this football game, they put themselves in position to at least be tied, at least mathematically, for first place here, depending on what the Arizona Cardinals are able to do. And so, again, I think that this is a game where Seattle has to hold serve. They have to prove to the LA Rams and Sean McVay that Mike Macdonald is the new brain guy in the division.
Yeah, this is a game that I think whoever drops it, look, it doesn't knock you out of the NFC West race. Even if the Seahawks fall to 4-5, this is a division where all the teams are so close together that you're still in the division. You're still within striking distance. But I'm with you. I would argue when you look at some of the factors in terms of how wild card teams are picked, the tiebreakers, look, the Seahawks badly need this. And look, you can't lose 4 straight games at Lumen Field and call yourself a playoff team or a contender. You can't do that. They have at some point got to play better in front of their home fans. You wonder why they're selling tickets to fans of the Buffalo Bills, whatever. I'll tell you this much. This is taking shots by saying this, but Rams fans don't typically travel the same way that, say, Bills Mafia or 49ers fans do. If the stadium is full of Rams uniforms on Sunday, that tells you the state of where things are at with the fan base right now. The Seahawks need to come out and they need to play good, solid football in all 3 phases so their fans have a reason to want to be there, to be excited to come cheer on the team. They have to re-earn that energy that used to be so renowned at Lumen Field. You got to go out and got to win games, and you got to do it convincingly. And then, look, this Rams team is 3-4, but as you said, they're playing really good football right now. If the Rams lose and they're 3-5, that puts them in a pretty bad spot too. So this is a desperation game, even though it's only week 9. And I think from Seattle's perspective, because they've already lost to the 49ers at home, they've lost 3 games in a row at home, they've already lost 3 games to NFC opponents. They need this game badly. They need to go out and get this victory. I would say that I would agree with you, slightly an edge to the Seahawks in terms of desperation here, just because of where things are at. They're going to be going into their bye week. You would love to get a win at home and then get that week off to really get healthy and make sure that you are good to go. But I think when you're just looking at the projections, the Athletic and New York Times NFL playoff projector right now, the Seahawks have the lowest odds to win this division, just 17%. And it goes back to those tiebreakers that I just mentioned that they already are falling behind on, losing 3 games already to the conference, being 0-1 in the NFC West, losing that game to the 49ers. This would be a game that carries a lot of sway one direction or the other. You beat the Rams, your playoff odds as far as NFC West titles are concerned go up dramatically. You lose this game, you're probably under 10%. You fall 0-2 and lose your first 2 home games in the division. That would certainly be a big loss for the Seahawks. So I'm in agreement with you. I think it's a desperation game for both teams to varying degrees. But I think from Seattle's perspective, because you're the home team and just how poorly they've played there, how poorly they've played against other NFC foes in general, they got a lot to prove here. Go out and get that victory. Yes, they beat the Falcons, so they do have a win against an NFC team, but you got to beat somebody in your division when you're at home. You can't lose 4 games in a row. So I would say that this truly is a must-win this stage of the season if you want to think that you're a contender in this division.
Yeah, I agree. And I really think that this is the very first game where you're going to have some conversations about what if the Seahawks had retained Pete Carroll as head coach rather than went with Mike Macdonald. Look, Pete Carroll had his struggles against Sean McVay of the LA Rams as well, obviously. But at the same time, I really do think that one of the great factors that Pete Carroll brought was a motivational factor, a leadership factor. And hey, I've gone through this before and I can motivate people to pull out a game at Lumen Field when I absolutely needed it. I have not seen that type of dynamic leadership ability yet from Mike Macdonald. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have it. It just means that he needs to prove it. And this is a game in which the Seahawks brought in Mike Macdonald to be able to match wits again against a guy McVay, against a guy like Kyle Shanahan of the 49ers, who, again, obviously the Seahawks lost against the 49ers already. So if you're going to go 0-2 against the so-called brain trust kind of coaches of the division, again, that is where the boo birds really are going to start to come out. The national skepticism really is going to start to kind of, creep its way into the doubt of Seahawk fans and, more importantly, Seahawk players. So again, I think that I always hesitate to call any game this early in the season as a must win for all the reasons that you just articulated, sir. But at the same time, I do think this is a very, very big game for the Seahawks here, an even bigger game for the Seahawks than it is for the Rams. And that's why I think that it's going to be a fun one to watch if you're the Seahawks fans, and you should be there at Lumen Field. The 12s need to be there because I do think this is going to be a game you could be pretty excited about if it goes in their favor.
When we come back, we're going to take a deeper dive into this game with our matchups of the week to watch here on Matchup Wednesday. We're going to start with the Seahawks on defense going up against a suddenly healthier Rams offense. We'll hit on that coming up next here on Locked On Seahawks. Okay, real talk. We've all been there feeling like we're burning cash with those rent checks. It's frustrating, right? But here's the deal. Built Rewards has figured out a way to make rent more rewarding. Say goodbye to the money bonfire and hello to a renter's revolution with Built. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes. Redeem them towards future rent payments. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free with Built Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Built points have consistently been ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use the URL so they know we sent you. Join built.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. Welcome back to Matchup Wednesday here on the Locked On Seahawks podcast. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of you 12s out there that are listening in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. For your second listen, don't forget to check out the new Locked On NFL, which is now twice a day in the morning. Get your shot of NFL espresso from Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans. And then in the evening, we've got our good friend, the barber himself, Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars, going to be giving you your second dose of NFL coverage, insight and analysis that you're not going to get anywhere else. Again, the Locked On NFL podcast. It is now twice a day. Make sure that you are subscribing on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to listen for free. All right, it's Matchup Wednesday, Week 9 edition. And look, I don't want to jinx this situation, Rob, but the Seahawks this year, we've had 8 games so far. The Seahawks, we have had 4 Matchup Wednesdays where we have started with defense. We've had 4 that we have started with offense. The Seahawks are 3-1 in the games where we have started with defense. They're 1-3 in the games that we have started on the offensive side of the football. So look, again, I'm hoping we're not jinxing ourselves here, but we're going to start with the Seahawks on defense. And honestly, to me, it is the most important side of the ball coming into this game when you consider that the Rams now have their dynamic duo of receivers back. But with that being said, I think we got to start the discussion here. When we're looking at this matchup, until the Seahawks can find a way to slow down a running game in general, they're going to have a difficult time stopping anybody. And, oh, by the way, the Rams have a pretty darn good duo of running backs led by Kyron Williams. They've got Blake Corum, the rookie out of Michigan. Williams already has 8 rushing touchdowns this year. I know he's only averaging 3.8 yards per carry, but look, he's been doing this behind an injury-ravaged offensive line. He has almost hit double-digit touchdowns. The Seahawks linebackers, you got to find a way to play at a higher level and limit the production of these runners, because if the Rams are able to run the ball well, the way that other teams have, with the passing game they've got, it's going to be really tricky to get stops in this game.
Yeah, it really is. As you said, Kyron Williams has 8 touchdowns. They've only played 7 games so far. He's got 8 rushing touchdowns, excuse me. He's got 2 more as a receiver. I mean, the only game in which he did not run for a touchdown was last week when he caught a touchdown pass against the Minnesota Vikings in a game that has absolutely cemented the Rams as one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now. So again, Kyron Williams has been spectacular with 10 total touchdowns in the first 7 games for the LA Rams. He has to be the primary focus of Seattle's game planning. Look, I have a great deal of respect for Cooper Kupp, for Puka Nacua, for Matthew Stafford, for Sean McVay as head coach. You have to stop the running game, as you just said. And to me, that's one of the things that makes this such a fascinating matchup for the Seahawks is, of course, they have Ernest Jones IV, who they brought in via trade, former Los Angeles Ram, who knows the way that Sean McVay is going to call these games, probably as well as any defensive player in all of the NFL at this point. So I think this is an interesting matchup for the Seahawks in that regard. Certainly Tyrell Dotson now at the weak side linebacker position. After previously playing at middle linebacker, he is going to have to be that much more effective. I think the Seahawks, it's not just about their linebackers. They've really got to get back into that gang tackling that we've seen in a lot of their victories that has been absolutely conspicuously absent in so many of their losses. So I do think that this is the number one matchup that we've got to be talking about here. But I know at the same time, there's going to be an awful lot of people who want to focus in on those playmaking wide receivers for the Rams and the fact that Seattle has their own two-headed monster at cornerback and Tariq Woolen and Devon Witherspoon, who are looking to create some big plays of their own.
Well, Devon Witherspoon was on the injury report, did not practice today. So that is something to keep an eye on. And we know that there's been injuries galore in this secondary. It just seems like they get one guy back and then another player gets hurt. Now, it's Wednesday. Witherspoon could practice tomorrow. It might have just been a one-day thing. We'll just have to wait and see. But whether Witherspoon plays or not, this is going to be one of the toughest tests this secondary has had because when healthy, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are as good of a 1-2 punch as any receiving core in the NFL. And they're so different from most of the elite duos that we see out there. I mean, we know the Seahawks, when DK Metcalf is healthy and they've got Tyler Lockett rolling, they've got 2 of the most explosive wide receivers. Even at this stage of his career, Lockett still has the ability to win over the top. But we're talking about 2 big-bodied receivers that are outstanding route runners that excel at creating after the catch and win contested catches consistently. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are just a different animal compared to what you're normally going to be facing off against. And Seattle's got some smaller corners away from Tariq Woolen, players that are not as big a body as some of these receivers that the Rams have. Now, Tutu Atwell's the exception to that rule, and he's had some big games against the Seahawks in the past. He's their number 3 target, but it's all about Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua and trying to limit their yards after the catch because these guys are going to get their balls that are going to be in their hands. They're going to be able to make some catches. You got to limit the yak with these guys, though, because if they are able to get yards after the catch consistently and move the chains, the Vikings learned this the hard way again the other day. It is a near impossible task to slow down this offense when they are able to churn out first downs with these 2 wide receivers.
Yeah, no question about it. And Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp have struggled with injuries so far this season. Puka's only played in 2 games. He's got 11 catches for 141 yards. Cooper Kupp has played in 3 games. He's got 23 catches for 198 yards and 2 touchdowns. Nacua has been held out of the end zone so far. You mentioned Tutu Atwell. He actually leads the team right now. Now, he's played in all 7 games. He leads the team with 24 receptions, 350 yards. He does not have a touchdown reception so far. The actual touchdown receiving leader is a receiver that we haven't mentioned yet, Demarcus Robinson, who has 3 touchdowns so far this season, including a critical play against the Minnesota Vikings in that win on Thursday night this last week. I think that the Los Angeles Rams are unique in that all of our focus is going to be on the top two wide receivers. And again, both of them are healthy now, and that is very much going to change the way that Sean McVay is going to be calling this offense. But at the same time, I also think that this is a little bit more of a dynamic offense than what we've seen from the Rams in the past. So it's going to be critical for Seattle to have all of their cornerbacks available to them. I do expect Devon Witherspoon to be able to play in this football game. And look, I don't want to sound overly critical of Witherspoon. I still believe that he is arguably Seattle's best defensive player, but he has 0 interceptions to this point. He has 1 forced fumble. He has 1 pass breakup. He just got beaten, as I said in yesterday's show, over and over again by Khalil Shakir. The Seahawks need Devon Witherspoon to live up to the hype of being in top 5 selection a couple of years ago. They really need him to play very well. They need Tariq Woolen to play at the all-pro level that he has flashed so far this season, whether it be Trey Brown or the guy who I think is going to start, likely Josh Jobe. They need them to play well in this football game as well. Matthew Stafford has been good this year. He's got 7 touchdowns in 7 games. He also has 5 interceptions, and he's got a number of questionable throws out there. If you can get a little bit of a pass rush on him, Corbin, I really do believe that Matthew Stafford will give you some opportunities. It's just going to be up to the Seahawks defensive backs. Right now, they have 1 corner who has 1 interception, 2 corners that have interception, Woolen and Josh Jobe. That's the extent of the interceptions from your cornerback so far. We've talked about this secondary as being one of the league's best. It's prove it time in this matchup.
And in order to get those turnover opportunities, I thought the Buffalo Bills last week did a phenomenal job of keeping the pass rush away from Josh Allen. It was the worst game that the pass rush in general has had for Seattle, but there's no excuse in this game. You're playing with your home crowd, which it should be your home crowd in this game. You should have plenty of fired up fans with a division rival coming into town, and you're facing a Rams offensive line that is missing 2 starters. Jonah Jackson, who was one of their prized additions in the offseason, he is still on injured reserve. Steve Avila, their center, he is still – neither one of them expected to play this week. So you have got to take advantage of the fact that the Rams are starting a rookie center. Logan Bruss is probably going to be back in the lineup. He did not play against the Vikings, but he has been the starter at the other guard spot since Jonah Jackson went down. Logan Bruss, he has struggled mightily in the games that he has played in to this point. He's given up 10 pressures in 3 starts. You have to take advantage of an offensive line. And look, Pro Football Focus grades, they're grades. It is what it is. But the Rams have been one of the worst pass-protecting offensive lines in the NFL this year because of the injuries they've had, particularly in the interior. Now, Kevin Dotson, their other guard, is a really good guard. But still, you have a center and a guard that you should be able to exploit with a fully healthy line. Leonard Williams, Jaron Reed, Byron Murphy II. I'm calling all 3 of them out right now. None of them played well against Buffalo. There is no excuse in this game. You want to beat the LA Rams, you need that defensive line to stand up and play like they're capable of, because they could change this game if they're able to take advantage of the offensive line injuries for the Rams. And Matt Stafford, if you're going to pressure him, the interior pressure is the best way to do it, and that's when you can force him into bad throws that can lead to interceptions.
Yeah, as we talked about a moment ago, look, if we're going to call out the guy like a Devon Witherspoon, number 5 overall selection in 2 years ago, I think that you got to call out Byron Murphy II, who was, basically non-existent in the loss to the Buffalo Bills a week ago. So this is an opportunity here against a 6th-round pick, Bo Limmer from Arkansas, who I think that Bo Limmer is actually a pretty solid player. He's 6'5", 310 pounds. He's not nothing, but still, at that height, at the center position, than a short, squatted, incredibly explosive player like Byron Murphy should be able to create some interior pass rush. And so, again, that to me is one of the matchups we have to be watching. If you can get a little bit of pressure in Matthew Stafford's face, this is not a guy who's going to be able to create on the move the way that, say, Josh Allen can do, the way that Daniel Jones can do, and 2 of the most surprising losses to some on Seattle's resume so far. Matthew Stafford isn't going to do that. If you can create a little bit of pressure, again, on him, I do think that he is going to create some turnover opportunities. Can the Seahawks actually turn that into points and get a little bit of momentum for their offense?
When we come back, we're going to flip the script. Seahawks on offense going up against the Rams defense. Don't go away. You're listening to Matchup Wednesday here on the Locked On Seahawks podcast. This episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. We're now at the midway point of the season, but you can still get a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play from across the league, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You can bet on everything from Ken Walker III scoring a rushing touchdown against the Rams, or DK Metcalf returning with a flurry from injury with the first 30-plus yard reception. Just throw in a $5 bet and you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to Matchup Wednesday here on the Locked On Seahawks podcast. I'm Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined as always by my coast in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Continuing to dive into all the key matchups here, entering week 9, Seahawks, Rams. Let's flip the script. We just looked at the Seahawks on defense going up against a much healthier Rams offense, at least at the skill positions. And now going to the Seahawks on offense, going up against the Rams defense. We're going to have a chance to talk about the big names. There's a chance DK Metcalf's back this week. We'll have a chance to look at how he matches up with this secondary. But look, going into last week's game against the Vikings, the Rams had the 30th ranked run defense in the NFL. They actually were worse than the Seahawks going into last week, and they performed fairly well against Minnesota. But again, I keep bringing this up. You can't make excuses anymore. If you cannot run the football in this game, the Rams are without Troy Reeder, one of their starting linebackers, and even with him, they don't have Ernest Jones anymore, who's now wearing a Seahawks uniform. Their linebacking group is one of the worst in the NFL, and it has been a real struggle for them to defend the run. Omar Speights is now starting to get some reps, and that's improved the unit a little bit, but he's got 5 career tackles to his name. It's not like this is a linebacking group that is a decorated one that's got seasoned vets that can help them raise their play. I mean, this is a untested group for the most part, especially without Troy Reeder. Ken Walker III and Zach Charbonnet, you got to get enough blocks that they can get to that second level and take advantage of those linebackers, because I truly believe if you have enough blocking there where Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet are matched up against a player like Omar Speights, I am taking the running back every single time. I think Seattle can rack up a ton of rushing yards. It's just going to boil down to the blocking, obviously, up front. But the matchup against these linebackers, getting Charbonnet and Walker involved in the passing game again as well, this should be a matchup that caters well to Seattle. We know there are other factors that play into this, but the Rams linebacking unit, that has been a big reason their run defense has struggled so much this year.
And there's no question about it. And I think the fact that the Rams feel like one of the hotter teams in the NFL is kind of a fascinating, just kind of something to analyze here. The Los Angeles Rams have not prioritized inside linebackers the way that most teams do. And I think that is interesting because of the fact that you look at this division, and of course the Seahawks have long thought that they were a good running team. The San Francisco 49ers have proven that they are a very good running team. The LA Rams themselves are a very good running team. You mentioned Troy Reeder, who is on IR right now with a hamstring injury. He was an undrafted free agent. Christian Roseboom is currently the Rams' leading tackler. He is a former undrafted free agent. Right now, Omar Speights, as you said, is the player that is basically taken over for Troy Reeder. He is an undrafted free agent. The Los Angeles Rams have just decided that inside linebackers do not matter. They're not worthy of those draft picks. Them draft picks, as their general manager, of course, famously said. And so I just think it's fascinating because, again, when you are going to invest second round draft picks in running backs, then damn it, this has got to be a game in which you use that draft ammunition to really punish the LA Rams. So look, again, as we talked about, there are so many fascinating matchups in this football game. This to me feels like one that is not only critical from a schematic standpoint, it's interesting from a strategic standpoint, not only in terms of game day, but in terms of draft day as well. So again, I would echo what you just said there. I think that this is a game that Kenneth Walker III has got to be absolutely spectacular. I think that UCLA's own Zach Charbonnet is going to want to perform well against the LA Rams. And so, again, I think that this is a game that if the Seahawks are not successful in running the football, then what the heck are you doing? I guess you got to just change your whole strategy, both from a head coach and a general manager perspective.
And they need the run game as much as any game because of what the Rams are starting to build on that defensive line. And I know Aaron Donald's no longer on the team, so you don't have to worry about 99, but you got to deal with Jared Verse. You got to deal with Byron Young, their other outside linebacker edge that is doing a lot of damage. And then in the interior, obviously, they've got some good young players as well. But it's the edge defenders that really concern me in this game. How do you slow down Jared Verse and Byron Young? Well, one way that you can do that is running the football. And so I think that is incredibly key. But when you do drop back to pass, I am most concerned about those edge guys, in part because we don't know who the heck is going to be starting at right tackle this week. If I had to predict, it's going to be Mike Jarrell again. Now, we'll see. Maybe by the end of the week, George Fant has made enough progress. But, Rob, this is clearly, to me, the second matchup that we have to keep a very close eye on, because this is the one. I think the run game can be a huge advantage for Seattle. This is the one that scares me the most from the Rams perspective, because you and I were both big on Jared Verse coming out of Florida State. He has really been a terror the last couple games for the Rams. Hasn't had the sack numbers yet, but it's coming. This is going to be a really tough defender to block for both Charles Cross and either Mike Jarrell or George Fant, whoever's playing in this game. And then Byron Young on the other side, a guy that the Seahawks were very interested in a couple of drafts ago coming out of Tennessee. He is quietly having a really good second season for the Rams. They've got some athletic, explosive dudes off the edge. If this ends up being a game where the Seahawks cannot run the ball and they have to try to sling it all over the place like they've had to do most of this season, that may not be a good situation because of that edge rushing talent that the Rams are going to be bringing with them to the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Jared Verse is playing 3 out of 4 snaps so far this season across from the left tackle. And so that could be something that Charles Cross is going to have to deal with, a very physical player. And some of his biggest struggles have been against guys who are physical. And again, Jared Verse is very effective in that. As you said, he has 2.5 sacks. He's got 7 tackles for loss. So this is a guy who has been very productive against the run and is just starting to kind of crank it up a notch when it comes to the passing game. On the other side, Byron Young has actually been the most effective pass rusher for the Rams so far. He's got 3 sacks so far. And I actually think if it is Mike Jarrell who is playing at the right tackle position, that he actually matches up better against Byron Young than, say, he did against Gregory Rousseau of the Buffalo Bills. Rousseau was a power guy, whereas Byron Young, again, is a speed guy. He actually reminds me of a little bit of another former Tennessee Volunteer that the Seahawks fans are going to remember a lot, and Darrell Taylor. And as frustrating as Darrell Taylor was for the Seahawks, I think we all recognize that he could be a speed rusher at times. That's, again, what Byron Young can do. Well, Mike Jarrell is a dynamic athlete himself. That is his game. And so I think that you could see Seattle be able to actually, be somewhat effective in pass protection against these rushers. Can they create the rushing lanes? To me, that's the biggest matchup here that you have to worry about. And if the Seahawks do allow themselves to be one-dimensional, if they have to throw from behind and allow Geno Smith to pad his numbers as the NFL's best passing yardage guy, then again, I think there's also going to be some opportunities for the Rams to create a whole bunch of sacks in this football game. So this is a matchup that the Seahawks have got to be able to kind of bring it to the Rams, be the forceful ones that are pushing the ball as far as the running game first, and then be able to kind of mix and match in your passing opportunities. That's going to be the best way of slowing down those two dynamic edge rushers.
It's been a few years since we've had the DK Metcalf versus Jalen Ramsey, at least in a Rams uniform. It's been a few years since we have been able to talk about that matchup. The Rams have undergone some significant turnover in their secondary. And early in the year, this team was giving up a lot of big plays downfield. They lost Darian Kendrick, who's one of their starting corners. They lost him to injured reserve. And right now they've got on one side, they've got Kobe Durant as one of their outside corners, and then Darius Williams. And I talked about him some yesterday. Darius Williams is not a new name. He played his first couple seasons in the league for the Rams, then signed with Jacksonville as a free agent. He comes back to the Rams this year, comes off injured reserve a few weeks ago, and suddenly this defense has been humming on all cylinders. They are not giving up the big plays that they were since Darius Williams returned. And Williams has a history against the Seahawks. Russell Wilson, he probably still has nightmares about Darius Williams. The guys seem to pick him off at least once every time the Seahawks played the Rams when those two guys were on those rosters. But I'm really curious to see how this plays out, because it sounds like DK Metcalf's got a really good chance to play this weekend. He didn't practice today. They're hoping he's going to practice tomorrow. You get DK Metcalf back. You have Jack Smith-Njigba, Tyler Lockett going up against this cornerback group. Darius Williams is a really good player. He's not viewed as a star, though. And then on the other side, Durant, he's had some rough games in the past against the Seattle Seahawks. So this could be a matchup that can play either way, just because the Rams secondary is playing pretty darn good football as of late, but the Seahawks have the weaponry to take advantage of downfield opportunities that the Rams have given up at least earlier this year.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, that's the thing, is it really, this comes down to whether DK Metcalf is going to be available to you, because you did not see much evidence that Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jake Bobo, Laviska Shenault, et cetera, can put this team on their back as receivers, again, in the loss to the Buffalo Bills. And the LA Rams do not have the size or physicality at the cornerback position that the Buffalo Bills do. And as I was kind of critical of the backs and the cornerback specifically, the only 2 interceptions so far this season, the Rams have been even worse in that department. They have 5 total interceptions, only 1 of them from their corners, and that was Kobe Durant, who got one a couple of weeks ago against, in my opinion, one of the worst teams in all of the NFL, the LA Raiders, and Gardner Minshew. Hey, much respect to the Wazoo guy, but still, that's a 2-6 team. Matthew Stafford, of course, is a dynamic team. So I really think that Geno Smith, this is a game where Geno Smith and Seattle's wide receivers have got to be able to take control of some of these opportunities. There should be, if there is play action opportunities, there should be some opportunities to go over the top. DK Metcalf was able to beat one of the best corners that this league has ever seen in Jalen Ramsey in the past, and in some cases in some dynamic fashion. Jalen Ramsey, of course, is no longer with the LA Rams. As you mentioned, this is a Rams secondary that can be exploited. They have put all of their assets essentially on the defensive line. If Seattle's offensive line is able to slow down that pass rush, if Seattle is able to run the football, there should be some opportunities in the deep and intermediate areas for Geno Smith to be able to eat a little bit in this football game and create some big plays for his wide receivers. That is why we're going to play the game. However, it remains to be seen if Seattle is actually able to step up in a game when they have to.
As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, it'll be Crossover Thursday, teaming up with Locked On Rams, taking a deeper dive into Sunday's upcoming NFC West matchup at Lumen Field. Make sure you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Go Hawks.